we're talking about Usher Syndrome and what people need to know about it. We'll hear some stories, and most importantly, you'll get some hope and find out about all the resources that are available. When I first found out I had Usher Syndrome many years ago, it was really hard to get information and it was really hard to connect. I am so grateful for the mentors I had, and this is your opportunity to find some mentors as well. Now, Meagan is going to tell you what Usher Syndrome is.
So I'm going to give you an overview of Usher Syndrome, like Deb said. My name is Meagan Moore. I myself have type 2A.
And I am also the Oregon ambassador with the Usher Syndrome Coalition. My goal is to reach everyone in Oregon, help everyone get connected, and everyone to find the right resources, find ways to cope, and find out the latest research that applies to us. So let me talk more about what Usher Syndrome is.
So when was it first identified? Believe it or not, it's been around for more than 100 years. It was first described by a German ophthalmologist. And then later in 1914, Charles Usher, a British ophthalmologist, was studying patients, and he started to notice, hey, they both have hearing loss and vision loss. And so he studied about 69 individuals, and that's where the term Usher syndrome came from. So what is Usher syndrome? So it usually is a combination of congenital bilateral sensorineural hearing loss, retinitis pigmentosa, and vestibular issue. And I'll go more into those. So you have bilateral hearing loss, usually at birth or later, and then the retinitis pigmentosa is what causes our vision to go away. So we have trouble in the nighttime, we had trouble with lighting, and then we get the tunnel vision, and then some of us will have balance issues. So we'll have trouble riding a bike, sitting up, or walking.
Progressive. Some types will have vestibular issues, which are balance issues. Usher syndrome is the leading genetic cause of deaf blindness, and what that means is both parents have to be a carrier of Usher syndrome, and then the child has to have both those genes to make Usher syndrome expressed. So both my parents had to be carrier of Usher syndrome type 2A, so that I would be affected by it, so that I would have the congenital bilateral sensorineural hearing loss and the retinitis pigmentosa. Now my children are now carriers because I automatically give them one of my genes. But they do not have Usher syndrome because my husband does not have a carrier gene. And so my children, they will not have any of the hearing loss, any of the vision loss, or any of the balance. So also with Usher syndrome, I want to be clear that there is no association with intellectual disability. That is something else if the person has Usher syndrome and an intellectual disability. There are 3 major types, and there are 10 different subtypes. And then it also affects both males and females.
So there's type 1, 2, and 3. So Usher type 1 has a couple of the subtypes underneath, and they usually are born with profound hearing loss, and they can do really well with cochlear implants. They have early onset RP, retinitis pigmentosa. It's usually recognized in the first decade of their life. And then they have vestibular problems, again, balance problems. So they may be late to sit up, late to walk, and then as adults, they may appear drunk when they're walking. And there's Usher syndrome type 2, again, that's where I would fall under. And there are a few subtypes under there as well. And usually we are born with moderate to severe hearing loss, and it usually stays stable. So I have worn hearing aids since I was 3 years old, and I have done really well with them. I had not noticed that retinitis pigmentosa until my 20s. We vary, but some of us will notice it in our teen years, some of us will notice it later in life. And I just remember having trouble at nighttime, and I was like, maybe this is normal. And then in type 2, we do not usually have balance issues. And then our last type 3, is a more rare. Usually the progressive hearing and vision loss happens later in life. And it's usually found in certain groups of people. And then, of course, there's always an outsider. So we do have a typical Usher syndrome, and which means the Usher gene is present, but it's not being fully expressed. And so some symptoms might be there and some might not be. And so I'm going to give you some numbers.
So Usher syndrome, according to researchers, there is an estimate of 20 to 50,000 with Usher syndrome in the USA. Usher is not due to a cycle of the viruses or environmental factors. You have to be genetically tested in order to be given the diagnosis of Usher syndrome. Now, from the numbers on the bottom, what I want you to understand is that according to the numbers from the researchers, there should be 250 to 625 babies born with Usher syndrome a year. Now, in 2018, the deaf-blind children served by the state were about 11,000, and then 345 were reported nationally. Those are pretty small numbers.
From the Usher Syndrome Coalition, we have what's called the Usher Trust, which is where we have everyone registered. And we only have about 1,000 people in the USA. And we also have about 1,600 worldwide, which includes 64 countries. And in Oregon, we only have 19 individuals registered. So there are a couple of challenges here. So where is everyone? Like, I gave you some crazy numbers that don't make sense. Like, there should be about 250 to 650 kids born yearly with this, but we only have 1,000 people registered, and that's including adults. So there are some issues. Most medical professionals don't know about it. Children get mainstreamed into school, and so, like me, I was mainstreamed in elementary school, and didn't know I was going to have a vision loss later. And so some people don't take the vision loss seriously. We're like, oh, it's just night blindness, they'll be fine. Or maybe they don't realize the hearing and the vision loss equals something else. And I want to be clear. So there's no intellectual disability with this syndrome. It's just the vision loss and then the hearing loss. And then some of us will have the balance issue. Some people know, but their kids don't know. And then some people haven't done the genetic testing, but a lot of us, I know I definitely felt this way when I was diagnosed about 9 years ago.
I was in my 20s. I did not think there was anyone else out there. And then when I started to notice people, when I started to connect with others, it really helped with coping with this diagnosis. Realizing it's not the end, realizing there's still so much more to life. This is a hard diagnosis. It is progressive. Supposedly my hearing loss won't get any worse, but what if it does? And then my vision loss, I'm just watching it fade away. And it's really hard. So we need those support systems.
We want to bring us together. We want to connect together. We want to learn about the resources. We want to learn from our mentors that can really give us hope. Because, it doesn't mean we need to stop living a fulfilled life. We can still have, crazy, awesome careers. We can still be parents. I have 3 kids myself, and they keep me busy, but I'm still very capable of doing it. But we also have people who don't, they learn ASL as kids. They didn't do speech. And so we don't catch them sometimes. And it's hard to catch the people who only use Braille for communication because they can't see, so they use Braille to communicate. And so there's some cultures out there who don't want to tell other people my kids have disabilities. And a lot of people think, if there's no cure, why bother? And I think each of us today will, we all would say it does matter because we want to connect with other people and we want to learn resources. We want to learn how to do well. We want to learn how to cope with it because it's progressive. It's happening over time. And sometimes it happens quickly. Sometimes it takes longer. And it's just the unknowing part it can be a little bit terrifying.
The important thing to know is there are researchers out there who really want to help us, but they need to have better numbers. They need to be able to get a better idea of exactly what we're going through. What is our vision like? Is it all the same for one type or one subgroup type, or are we different for a different reason? And so researchers, the more they know about us, the more we are likely to get a cure sooner than later. So here are some resources. So again, Usher Syndrome Coalition, we are building a worldwide Usher community. We want to be the source of information for Usher Syndrome. We have social media, we have Twitter, we have Usher Awareness Day, which is this year will be September 19th, 2020. We want people to register with the Ush Trust because it is how we get our information out there for the researchers. It's confidential. No one else is going to get your information. It includes all ages and types of Usher. And it's just so important the more of us that sign up, we don't have to give them our name or any of our information. And then sometimes they want to do a natural history. They want to find out, what is it like for this person? If we do these testing for over 5 years, what is the progression? And they can just learn so much from that. And it builds a bridge between each of us, those of us affected by Usher syndrome. I know I have very much appreciated the people I have met who are very successful and have done well. I know it's important for me to meet other moms who have kids, because being a mom is already, challenging in ways. It's fulfilling, it's exciting, but my Usher syndrome diagnosis brings on challenges that not very many people can relate with. So when I connect with other moms who have Usher, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. And it's so encouraging to know that I'm not alone.
And so I myself volunteer with the Usher Syndrome Coalition. I am the Oregon ambassador. And so I'm happy to connect with anyone who watches this video and learns from us. We are here to help you find the right connection. And I also want to say this is the first year in Oregon that we are recognizing Usher Syndrome Awareness Day, which is going to be September 19th, 2020. Hooray!
So please look up the usherregistry.org. And then here are some contact information for the Usher Syndrome Coalition. So for the Ush Trust Registry, it is www.usher-registry.org. And then our website would be www.usher-syndrome.org. Krista is our executive director. We have Julia Dunning, who is our program coordinator, and she is a mom of a child with Usher 1B. And then we have Nancy O'Donnell, who is in charge of outreach. And her email address is n.odonnell, ODONNELL, at usher-syndrome.org. And of course, if you guys like Google like I do, if you simply Google in Usher Syndrome, you will find our Usher Syndrome Coalition page. And I am also listed under ambassadors for Oregon. And then I appreciate you guys watching this video and learning more about Usher syndrome with me.
Hey there, my name is David. I'm 23 years old and I have Usher type 1B. I was born completely deaf on both sides, and I started losing my vision from a very early age. Meagan was talking about how important it is to find a community of people with Usher and be able to get those resources. And in my opinion, in my experience, the reason why it's been so hard for somebody like me to find a group of people that I actually identify with, somebody with Usher, is because hearing loss is its own problem. It's its own community with people that speak ASL. Vision loss is its own community, especially among the older generation. And what I found between the two communities is that if you have hearing loss, the vast majority of their solutions are vision-based. They give you a visual language and ASL to learn, and they give you tricks of how to look at your world in order to make up for what you can't hear. And then the problem with the vision loss community is that their fix is exactly the opposite. You want to be able to rely on your hearing to make up for what you can't see. And then you have somebody like me who has bad hearing and bad vision. I can't really rely very well on the other sense to pick up what I can't see. But it comes at it from a third direction as well, because I'm not Helen Keller. I'm not completely blind, and I'm not completely deaf. And most people with Usher have at least some residual either vision or hearing, or they can get a little bit of their hearing back with hearing aids or cochlear implants. So it's not a completely dead sense of vision, and it's not a completely dead sense of hearing. So I'm stuck right here in the middle between being completely deaf, being completely blind, being both, and being neither. And then the worst part about it is that it can fluctuate day by day, especially my vision. It can be really bad one day and it can be not so bad the next. And so who do I turn to figure out help with this? There's really nobody else that I've ever found up until this year, and I'm 23 years old, that's ever had this kind of an issue before. And it really helps me feel validated that there are plenty of other people out here who not only are going through this now, but may have already gone through this 20 years ago and are remembering like it was yesterday exactly these challenges that I sometimes wonder about myself. My favorite analogy is, especially for the vision issue, I can see that pen on the counter 20 feet away, but I'm going to trip over a cow to get there because my vision is really good in certain spots and really bad in others. My hearing is exactly the same. Since I was born completely deaf, I have cochlear implants on both sides that I got when I was a very young child. And because of that, I was able to at least be able to get some hearing from an early age. And now I learn how to speak and I learn how to interact with people. And like Meagan said, there's no mental disability whatsoever involved with this. It's just perhaps slow learning because of a restriction on the inputs of your hearing and your vision. So that's another problem that sometimes I face is when people see that I'm hearing impaired or that I'm visually impaired, they immediately think that I'm not all there mentally simply because I can't hear or can't see everything. That's why having people around me that validate my existence is such a help that I didn't have before. So with my version of retinitis pigmentosa, my vision loss comes from the outside in. I still have pretty good vision right here in the center. I can see people's faces really well, but they can sneak up on me at a moment's notice because I have no vision out here in the corners whatsoever. It's tunnel vision that's slowly getting worse and worse as the years go on. So sometimes people wonder, am I even blind? Am I even visually impaired at all? The answer is yes, I am legally blind because I have such bad tunnel vision. But if I'm looking right at you, I can identify you. I can read perfectly well. And sometimes that clashes with people's ideas of what blindness is. It's either lights on or lights off for vision in a lot of people's minds. And so a lot of people's hearing is exactly the same way. So it's right there in the middle. And while this has been a challenge for me to do things in my life, it hasn't made anything particularly impossible. As a matter of fact, all of last summer I spent in Europe, both traveling and in school in Berlin, Germany. I did that on my own, and I was able to do that with minimal assistance from others, just through the tips and tricks that I've learned on how to handle my vision and my hearing. It's not made things like that impossible, but it's certainly made things like that challenging. And I want to be able to bring hope to people in the future that vision loss and hearing loss, whether partial or complete, is not necessarily the end. Since I can speak so well, I want to see if I can make that a skill and some kind of an outreach that I can speak to people who have these type of problems. I can teach people, perhaps parents of children that are deaf and or blind, to give them the resources to get into the right schools that they need, the right resources that they need to decide whether, say, hearing aids or cochlear implants are the right decision for them. Of a large-scale career. I'm perfectly capable of a large-scale career out of this point. What that is, I don't know. but my hopes and dreams are still completely intact. Yes, so I am a college student as well. I'm a junior, and I've been through 3 different colleges in my life. And there are, at most colleges, any of the large ones, there are disability resource centers that have ways of helping people with hearing loss, with vision loss, with some version of both. There's a lot of technology that's available, and most of the college professors that I've been in touch with have been really, really helpful in understanding that I'm doing the best that I can, but I might need a little bit of help to just be on the same playing field as a lot of other people. And the funny thing for me is that despite the fact that my last university was wonderful for the resources, it was actually one of the hardest for me because it was in the middle of downtown core and there's traffic everywhere. I can barely hear and see where the traffic is coming from. So I can get the learning perfectly fine with technology, but navigating around the campus can sometimes be hazardous. Now I go to a college that is out in the middle of the fields and is much easier for me to get around. And I hope very soon to be able to find the kind of community that I started to build at some of the other colleges. There are people out there that are doing the higher education with vision loss, with hearing loss, with both, and with many other disabilities that are much more pronounced and much more severe than even just those type of problems. So there are definitely resources in the professional world. There are resources in the academic world. But sometimes we just need resources on a personal level. We need people who are just going to be friends and help us out with this kind of a problem. That's a lot of what the USH Coalition and the USH Trust have been able to do, just give you connections with people who are having these issues, not just necessarily connecting you with doctors or connecting you with disability resource centers or things like that, but just friends who understand that, yes, this is a real problem that we were all born with and we're all going to get through together. I'm going to pass it off to my own mother, who has the experience of somebody from the outside raising me when she had no idea what she was getting into for either the blindness or the deafness problems.
My name is Joanne, and I am a mom of 5 kids, and both my oldest and my youngest have Usher Syndrome type 1B. My oldest, David, that you just met, is 23, and my youngest is 10. They have both really excelled in their dealing with their hearing loss since we figured that out since they were very young. And basically we've had them get cochlear implants when they were very little. And that has been an amazing accomplishment for them to be able to hear their outside environment, to be safer with environmental sounds. And the technology advances just between the 2 kids of 13 years was amazing. And the timing, the earlier they get it, the better. And my second son, Tyler, has had the benefit of even an earlier implantation than David, and his hearing and reaction to sound is even better than what David has. And both of their voices are normal because they were able to hear from such an early age. And the brain development that occurs neurologically during that time is an amazing effect when they have during those language acquisition years, access to sound. And so we spent their whole growing up lives dealing with the hearing loss part. And it wasn't until David was probably junior high school age that he was really beginning to see changes in his peripheral vision, where he was noticing tripping over things and some of the limitations there. But because it's progressive, it's only been in recent times that he has had such a significant peripheral vision loss to where he's now considered legally blind due to the visual field testing. Basically, he got his driver's license at 16, was able to drive for a couple years until we realized it really wasn't safe anymore, and he had to give that up. But he did well when he was driving, and so the peripheral vision is such an issue that we don't think of a lot of times. It affects your reaction time because you don't see something until it's right in front of you rather than if you saw it coming from the side earlier. I'm just thinking that then basically with Tyler, he's got all of this ahead of him. He has a big brother that has forged the path ahead of him, and he's taken it all in stride. And we've been there, done that now, and we kind of know what to do. Portland, Oregon has amazing resources for parents and children with Usher Syndrome. We're blessed to have some of the best doctors in the country right here in Portland at KCI Institute, and Oregon Health Sciences University. And they've been great, both from the hearing aspect and now the vision aspect as well. We've been very blessed also to work with the Oregon Commission for the Blind, and David's been receiving training there on how to get around now with a cane, which helps him in environments where there's lots of people, doesn't want to trip over kids, or getting around college campus, where it helps, because in peripheral vision, when you can't see out here, it affects everything from the top and bottom and both sides. And so it's easy to hit your head. It's easy to trip over things. And so the cane just kind of gives people a little bit of a warning that he's coming, because he doesn't see them. I think emotionally, one of the biggest things that's been difficult dealing with the kids is the social interaction is difficult if people think you're ignoring them. And when you can't see them come up, and when you can't hear them call your name maybe from a distance or yell something out, people think you're snubbing them. And so that's been kind of a difficult thing to deal with at times. But the kids, they've learned how to advocate for themselves. And we've also, the family members and friends that are around them have learned to step in and say, hey, so-and-so just yelled goodbye to you, or, you know, hey, did you hear this person, or get their attention. And it's really helpful to have family on board and friends on board with what's going on, so that everybody can be supportive and not make them feel outcast. I think one of the hardest environments also is small group communication, when kids stand around and talk over each other and the speaker jumps around. That's hard for them to follow who's talking sometimes. So having another friend or family member around to just kind of interpret or direct traffic sometimes is helpful. But basically, David's learned to advocate for himself really well over the years, and not take it personally, kind of take it in stride, and to be able to explain to people, hey, you know, if I don't respond to you, it's not because I wasn't listening or didn't, you know, answer. He had to do that with teachers, coaches. He played baseball for a while, is to let him know, hey, I'm not ignoring you. I want to do what you tell me to do. Sometimes you got to get my attention first. And we still forget. We still throw information out there and don't say their name first, so they realize to tune in. So anyway, it's a learning experience, and it's great for families to be able to work on this together. And it's really great as a parent to have resources and other family members or other community members to draw on. Throughout the experience with hearing loss, we did have a number of people that we knew that we were connected with through OHSU, that told us, you know, that we were able to connect with, share experiences with. And then later, when we found out there was the vision component to it, we just kind of thought, okay, well, now we'll tackle that. And it's been harder to find people with vision issues, especially the younger people. A lot of elderly people have this condition, but it's harder to connect with younger people that do. And even more so, I realized as a mom, it wasn't until attending the Usher Syndrome Coalition this year online, the conference, that hearing the stories of other parents dealing with both of these in the same kid, these issues, it really dawned on me that how much I could use getting around other people and moms that experience these same things, because it's very different than just hearing or just vision issues. Having them combined has been in a different experience than most parents have just doing one or the other. And so watching one of those videos, just about brought me to tears, because I was like, I need that kind of connection. And hearing these other people have the same stories was just amazing to be able to have that experience. So I'm looking forward to getting more involved with the Usher Coalition and meeting other families and being a resource. We've been doing this now for 20 some years. So we've been around and done a lot, and I like being a resource to other families and young parents dealing with it. And we hope that you're encouraged by this. Life is great, and they fit right in. It just takes some extra steps. And what we've learned is with our kids, every one of them has their own thing. I've got my thing. Everybody's got their thing. And for us, we raised our kids that they're our kids first. They are human beings first. And their hearing loss or their vision loss is just one more thing about them that we just move along with. And so I hope that's encouraging to everybody.
Hi, I'm Deb Marinos, and I'm 63. I have Usher's 2A, which means that I was born with moderately severe hearing loss. I did not get my hearing aids until I was in 4th grade. but I did get some training in speech and things, so I was able to talk. My parents were really concerned about the educational system then. That was before we had the ADA and the IDA and all of the laws that make it possible for kids with disabilities to have choices around what kind of education they can have or what settings. And so it was a different world. And, you know, it was true. Sometimes I did get into fights on the playground because somebody wanted to bully me because I had a hearing aid. I was not diagnosed, but it didn't matter. I had a lot of fun and I did everything in school. I played in the band and I played sports and I worked and swam and did everything that any kid wanted to do. And then later, I became an electrician, went to college, enjoyed that, did some engineering, and then I ended up being an electrician, working out in the field, and got married and had 3 kids. And when I was 35, I was running my own electrical contracting business when I found out that I had pretty bad RP. And actually, I was already down to what we call 20 degrees, which is legal blind. I didn't know that. I was not given very good information initially. People, like others have said, it's pretty rare. So the eye doctor didn't really know what the progression might be. They didn't know when I should stop driving. They didn't really have a lot of information for me in that. So I had to make decisions by myself. And I do have 2 sisters that have the same thing. And we haven't talked too much about the genetics. For the most part, Usher's is what we call an autosomal recessive. So there's often no other family members in the generations before. It just pops up. It's one of those rare things. Both parents have the affected genes. And then as you can see, in every birth, there's a 1 in 4 chance of having the magic connection of the 2 genes. In any case, my sisters both were very successful. We all 3 got master's degrees. I have a sister who's quite a bit older than I. She was a principal and a computer scientist. I went back to school after I sold my electrical business. I ran it 9 years without driving, and it was challenging, but it wasn't too hard because I always had an apprentice or a shop person or someone that could do the driving, and I could continue to work. Even at 63, I still have good central vision in one eye. Like the others have said, I can still read print and normal size print. I can't read very much of it because my eyes get super tired, and the contrast gets worse and worse as time goes by. And so I have to be really careful about the lighting and what colors I look at, whether the paper's shiny and all those kinds of things. But anyway, I decided I wanted some time with my kids because they were in junior high and high school. And so I went back to school and learned to be, well, actually, I went to teaching school. So I taught in the high school for a number of years in the business department. And then I went ahead and got a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. And so I work for the state, for the Oregon Commission for the Blind, and I agree it's a wonderful program. You can choose a job and they will train you and help you get to where you need to be so that you can be just like everybody else and enjoy all the benefits of being financially independent. And then after a while, I developed some other issues. And that's one thing that I really want to talk about is the support and how hard it is needs to be embraced. It was something I did not learn to shake it off literally, or the mind-body connection, until the last few years, where it's so important to have a chance to breathe. It's so important to have connection. It's important to recognize the role that the emotional and all the memorization and all the constantly having to work harder than everybody else to get the same thing done, and you're really happy you get it done, but sometimes it's darn frustrating and it can get really overwhelming. And so having professional support, which is something that I do now, I have a small private practice doing mental health counseling. for anybody that is busy and working too hard. That's my specialty. And I also do cultural competence training for healthcare providers. As in my walk going through these last 30 years, um, people really want to know how to help. They really want to understand how to be effective and to understand what somebody's going through. But it's really hard to ask, and it's really hard to explain. And how do you explain you can't see when you can see? And like David said, and so that's what I do now, and that's my passion, is to make sure that everybody that wants to can have an opportunity to wear simulators and to learn from my experience of working with several hundred blind people who may have the same diagnosis but have a totally different experience in life, because we all come with all of our other characteristics and packages and personalities and desires and interests. And so one size does not fit all. And it is, just as I said before, so absolutely wonderful to have connections with other people, to see the possibility, to know that you can be what you want to be and you can be very different. And to also have that validation that it can be difficult, and is oftentimes. For example, technology. I use JAWS on the computer or Zoom text when I need it. I don't need it all the time, but I do use it. And then I have a Braille display. Well, every time there's an update on iOS or in Microsoft, one of my pieces of equipment refuses to work. If I'm really lucky, there'll be a patch, and it might work in a week or two, in a day or two. But sometimes I have to relearn the whole darn thing because it's completely changed. And so at any given time, I keep something like 400 or 500 different keyboard connections, shortcuts, and all of that in my head in order to be able to use equipment. And so when I say that I have a blender day where everything is just like, uh-oh, somebody pushed the blender and all the letters just don't, I know that I need more rest. I know that I need more time to figure things out. And so that's been a really hard thing for me. I like to go fast. I want everything to happen now. I want things, and that's the way I've been my whole life. And of course, that didn't work really well for me in the end, although I had a lot of fun and have done a lot of things and enjoyed them all. But I highly recommend people getting a good grip on how to use mind body skills like shaking and dancing and breathing and imagery and writing and journaling and another 12 or so skills that will help you deal with all of that stress and tension that's inside of you, so that it doesn't make you sick while you're going through this unique experience of having both vision and hearing loss affected, and perhaps balance as well. So I want to turn it back to Meagan so she can tell you where you can find resources and what you can do next.
We would love to connect with you more. Please look us up on the Usher Syndrome Coalition website, www.usher-syndrome.org. That would be www.usher-syndrome.org, and look up the ambassador for Oregon, and you'll find my email and contact information. You can also use wonderful Google and put in Usher Syndrome, and we will pop up on the top of your browser. And we just hope that we have brought more awareness of what Usher Syndrome is. As I said before, there is no cure, but however, there's lots of research going on, very exciting research, especially here in Oregon, up in Portland. And there could be a cure for the blindness part coming any day. But more importantly, I have learned that connecting with others has made a huge impact on the way I think about my life. I'm more excited to keep going to school. I'm excited to keep being a mom, and I understand now that my kids will just learn how to be more compassionate. They'll learn to help me laugh it off when I run into a garbage can or something crazy. And it's so important to be able to enjoy life and also embrace all of yourself. So I invite you, reach out and connect with us. We will give you the latest information on research that we know, and we will give you the best support that we know and the best accommodations, just so that you can do the best you.